of solving problems. And we're going to look through history at problems that were solved by major world powers, particularly in the Old Testament era. And we're gonna tackle those problems ourselves and see how we're able to solve them. That doesn't, what I just said shouldn't really make any sense to you yet. It will by the end of the night. Let me give you a quick overview of where we're going to go for the next 5 weeks. Those of you who have done these things with me before know that I like to make sure we have a plan. So week 1, we're going to talk about bricks, Egypt, and using our environment. Week 2, we're going to talk about assault, Assyria, and angles, which is nicely alliterative, isn't it? Week 3, dreams, Babylon, and systems. Week 4, boats, Persia, and innovation. And week 5, we're either going to do Greece or Rome. We're going to see how we're doing and which one will be more fun. So that one will be up in the Air Force a little bit. But so that's roughly our plan. And as you all know well, it's probably going to change 8 times between now and week 5. But at the moment, this is our plan. And so the way we're going to do this, our framework is going to be a thought experiment. And so we're all going to need to just kind of embrace a little bit of silliness for this to work. And so we are going to begin with our solar system. This is our solar system. Obviously, it's satellite imagery. And this is Earth. So we are all somewhere right in here. Now, the wonderful thing is that what a lot of people don't know, one of our lesser known committees at Swickley Presbyterian Church is the Space Evangelism Committee. And they have recently discovered this strange other planet that is exactly on Earth's orbit, but we've never noticed it before because it's directly across the sun. It is another imaginary Earth. And so it's always on the other side of the sun from us, so we've never seen it. But our Space Evangelism Committee has discovered this other imaginary Earth. Now, naturally, after discovering another planet, our Space Evangelism Committee decided the natural thing to do is to evangelize this other Earth. And so they have put together, as Presbyterians, a task force or committee to go visit this other Earth made up entirely of drones. Here is our settler drone. We have sent a committee of settler drones to this other Earth. And the settler drones are, they're remarkable. We got a really good deal on them because they're a lot like humans. They eat food. They actually fuel themselves on organic material. So they need to eat just like we do. They need a lot of downtime, approximately 8 hours of downtime every night, a lot like human sleep. And like humans, they're not all that smart. They have limited knowledge. We had 2 options. We could either get settler drones that had a whole lot of information preloaded, or we could get drones that could learn. And we decided it was better to get drones that could learn than drones that started with a lot of information. So we've got these little settler drones, and the Space Evangelism Committee sent them a few weeks ago. And so they have already touched down. And see, this was such a major during a major astronomical incident that we had to cover for it. So that whole mess with the Mars drone, we organized that to distract people from what was really happening in the other Earth. And so about the time that Mars drone was landing, our drones were landing on the imaginary Earth. And they can communicate with us, but we can't send them materials. And so they were able to send us some digital images of the ground that they saw. And again, we got these things on discount. So the imagery is a little rough, but it looks like their area is something like this. This is the most habitable area that they've found. You'll notice there's a nice river, there's a lot of water. And so they blew up this area right here where the river and the sea meet. And they've set up a capital right along the river where there are some islands. So this is where our drones are settling. And as they've been settling, they realize that this place is exactly like Earth. It has mountains, it has valleys, there are animals. It is identical to Earth with one exception. there are no humans. And so, I mean, there are alligators, there are giraffes, there are apples, there's sand, there's water. There are no human beings, and so they've got the run of the place.
As soon as I can.
And they needed to set up some buildings where they could live and be protected from the elements. And so our settler drones, being innovative little characters, they discovered that they could build bricks. And so they used water and mud, and they formed some clay, and they bake it in the sun, and they've been able to create these fantastic bricks, and they're starting to put together kind of crude huts and structures. But if you look carefully at this picture, you'll notice there is a problem with the bricks. They break. They're just made of mud and water, and so they found that if they put too much weight on them and it's not exactly evenly distributed, their bricks start to crumble. And so the settler drones have sent us a request. They're asking for some help in how to design better bricks. But they don't have a whole lot of tools. They can't work with metal. They don't have blow torches. They really have very crude instruments at their disposal at the moment. And so they told us what they have available. And so our settler drones, they've been baking bricks like this, and they have mud. They got plenty of mud because they just add the water to the dirt, and it's amazing how much the mud just appears. So they got access to mud. There's a lot of stone nearby. They don't have to work too hard to quarry out the stone. There's rock all over the place. So they could add stone to their bricks. They have some plant material. They've got like straw and things like that they could add to the bricks. There's lots of water. You remember the map, right? There were rivers and seas. So they've got access to water. And there's also a lot of sand. They're in this fertile area surrounded by desert. So they're wondering if they should add rocks or straw or water or sand to the bricks, or maybe if they should change the process. Maybe they should bake it for longer or keep it cold for longer. Or another thing they asked is maybe if they should just, instead of doing rectangles, should they do triangles or rectangles or circle bricks? But so these are their questions. In order to make better bricks, should they add rocks or straw or water or sand or some combination of them? Should they change the process, or should they change the shape of the bricks so that they don't crumble while they build? And I'm not exactly sure what the best way is to do this. I suspect some of you in this group know the answer to this question because I know you all. However, what we're going to do is we are going to, I want you to jump into this thought experiment in breakout rooms. Take between 5 and 10 minutes and come up with a plan for our settler drones. How can they make better bricks with the materials they have available to them? Should they change the shape? Should they change the materials? Should they change the process? And if so, give them some guidance. What shape should they use? What materials should they use? If they need to change their process, how can they do that? Now, remember, these are they're drones. They're not real bright. You can't ask them to do a whole lot of really complicated stuff. You're going to have to keep it simple. They can add different ingredients. They can change the length of time that they bake it, or they can change the shape. But you can't ask them to start adding alloys or to start doing complicated research. They just aren't able to do that. Those are our three options. So we're going to send you into your breakout rooms, and when you come back, we'll do another poll, and we'll hear how we think our settler drones can make better bricks. So Rebecca, can you set up some breakout rooms for us? All right, see you in a few minutes. Our poll, I want to hear what you came up with. So how did you decide to fix the bricks? What can our drones do to create stronger construction material? All right, our answers are starting to come in. Did you add stone, add water, add sand, add straw? Did you change the shape, change the process, or do a bunch of the above? We've got a very clear front runner here. All right, we got our answers coming in. We'll give you another minute or so. Very nice. Okay. 26 of you have voted. I'll give you about 15 more seconds. Let our answers come in. Oh, this is fun. All right. So 5 more seconds if anybody wants to get in your vote before the time runs out. All right. So we have decided how we want our drones to improve the quality of their bricks. Overwhelmingly, we think they need to add straw. We want them to add straw to their bricks.
Yes.
All right. So let's find out what we can about our bricks and our drones. So we'll pop over here. All right. So I am curious to hear it from. Well, we did our poll, so we came up with our plan. We decided we want them to use straw, and so we really focus more on material than shape or process. So as you guys were in the breakout rooms, I was looking at this map and I noticed something kind of strange about it. Did anybody else notice something strange about this map? The weirdest thing. Yeah, and I mean, this is what the drone sent me. But if you take this map and and you turn it upside down, it looks a lot like an area on Earth. Right here, like this sort of boot looking place, this looks a lot like Italy to me. And I mean, that means that over here, this would be Egypt, and Israel would be right up here. And, as I was looking at that and kind of thinking through it, yeah, the Egyptians had to solve this exact question as they were making their bricks. And it ties right into a Bible story, which some of you may have thought of. So the important thing for this is we're thinking about Egypt, is that Egypt is in power in a huge portion of the Old Testament, but especially right there in Genesis. And if you remember the story, Joseph he had all those brothers, and Joseph had that great coat. And people sometimes argue about whether it had lots of colors or whether it had fancy sleeves. But his brothers beat him up. They sold him into slavery, and he ended up in Egypt. And then when he was 30 years old, he entered the service of Pharaoh, king of Egypt. And Joseph went from the presence of Pharaoh and went through all the land of Egypt. During the 7 plenteous years, the earth produced abundantly. He gathered up all the food of the 7 years when there was plenty in the land of Egypt, and stored up food in the cities. He stored up in every city the food from the fields around it. Right. So Joseph interpreted the dreams. He stored all this food while there were good years, and then there were years of famine. And his brothers, who had sold him as a slave, ended up running out of food. And so they then came to Joseph, and there's all kinds of great stuff that happens. But after they work all that out, Joseph brings the entire family. And so his dad and his brothers and their kids all moved to Egypt. And this is right here towards the end of Genesis. Israel settled in the land of Egypt, in the region of Goshen, and they gained possessions in it and were fruitful and multiplied exceedingly. So Israel was on their own, but they ended up moving into Egypt because Joseph was so powerful there, and there was lots of food. And that went really well for like a little while, because early in Genesis, a new king arose over Egypt who did not know Joseph. He said to his people, "Look, the Israelite people are more numerous and more powerful than we. Come, let us deal shrewdly with them, or they will increase, and in the event of war, join our enemies and fight against us and escape from the land." Therefore, they set taskmasters over them to oppress them with forced labor. They built supply cities, Pithom and Ramses, for Pharaoh. And as the Israelite slaves were building these cities, they had to face the exact same problem. They had to build bricks that were strong enough to create these massive cities. And so they had to figure out what they could do beyond mud and water. And so here we go. They did not use extra sand. Too much sand actually would make the bricks break more easily. They could have played with the shape and size, but ultimately they stuck pretty much with rectangles. If they added too much water, the bricks actually broke very quickly. And if you add too much stone, it's kind of counterintuitive, but the bricks break apart really fast with too much stone. So they had just a few more options, and baking them, they were going to be out in the sun forever. Baking them longer didn't make any difference. The trick to making stronger bricks was straw. And so we got it right. You guys guessed pretty well on the whole. Our group, we will tell our settler drones. And so as we keep reading in Exodus, what we find is that same day, Pharaoh commanded the taskmasters of the people, as well as their supervisors, you shall no longer give the people straw to make bricks as before. Let them go and gather straw for themselves. And so we have right here in the Bible, we have this record, it kind of accidentally, about how the Egyptians made bricks. They added straw to their bricks to make them stronger. Now, this is kind of a strange thing because you would think that adding stone would make your brick stronger, or maybe something like sand that would give it a little more grit, but it's actually something as flimsy as straw. Now, I'm going to attempt to explain to you why the straw makes the brick stronger. I know some of you are going to be able to do this better than I can and will be able to correct me. Keith, I'm looking at you like right now. Some of you would be able to correct me, but don't worry, this is going to be close enough for our purposes. So, why does it work to make the bricks out of straw? So this really fascinating thing happens with bricks. If you have pressure on bricks from both sides, it's called compression. And bricks, even out of mud, they do pretty well with this. As long as all the weight is pretty evenly distributed, you can press on them from both sides and they hold up. Where you start to get into trouble is if it's not exactly even. And if there's a force pushing down from the top, what ends up happening is there's a force that pushes out from sort of the bottom sides. This is called tensile strength, and it's pulling the brick apart. So it's getting compressed from the top, and now it's getting pulled apart from the bottom. And as that happens, and if you watch a brick break in slow motion, it actually breaks like this. It sort of almost tears from the bottom. And so it gets pulled apart and it rips on the way up. But if you want to make a stronger brick, add straw to it. And once you start to push down from the top and that force pulls it apart from the bottom, the straw holds it together. And so the straw is keeping it from being torn apart. The straw doesn't help it this way. The straw helps it from not going that way. Now, that's not a scientific explanation, as you know, but that's a simple, Keith, I got the thumbs up. We're good. It's close enough. And so the Egyptians found that by adding straw, their bricks were stronger. And I can tell you that this actually works. I experimented with this at home with clay bricks. And sure enough, if you add rock or water or sand, they actually fall apart much easier. But if you add fibers to them, the bricks, they actually took about 40% more weight by adding fiber to the bricks. And so for our settler drones, going back to our experiment, we're going to have them do exactly this. We're going to have them add some straw to their bricks and see if they can't build an impressive capital city for us by next week. But before we think too much about next week, this is another view of that image of Egypt. And this is, to call it an empire is maybe not exactly right, but this is the territory that Egypt controlled during the time of Genesis and Exodus. And so if you look, this area called Canaan, Canaan is what the Joshua and the descendants of Jacob, Canaan is what they invaded and conquered, and it became Israel. So Israel is right here, and Egypt is over here. And so as we think about the Old Testament, it's important for us to bear in mind who is in charge at any given point. And so for the next 5 weeks, we're going to pay attention to who is the major power and what Bible characters went alongside them. And so this is not a timeline in terms of years, but in terms of sequence. So right here, towards the end of Genesis and the very beginning of Exodus, the people of Israel are in Egypt. And if you want to think about characters, when Egypt was a world power, you've got Abraham. Abraham's not in Egypt, but while Egypt is a major power, Jacob, Joseph. And then once you get into Exodus, Exodus is the story of the people leaving Egypt. And so you've got Moses and Aaron and all the stories about the wandering through the wilderness. But then even once the people establish their own kingdom, Egypt is still the major world power. Israel is a tiny little neighbor to Egypt. And so that's when you get books like Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, Joshua, Judges, Ruth, First and Second Samuel, First Kings, First Chronicles. That's all happening while Egypt is the major world power. And so, if you want to think about what Bible characters may have lived when Egypt was at the peak of it, people like Joshua, Gideon, Deborah, Samson, Ruth, Saul, David, Solomon, Elijah, Elisha, all those great characters, they lived during a time when the sort of superpower at their point in the world was Egypt. And part of the way Egypt was able to maintain its power was through the strength of its buildings. And if you think about, if you try to just imagine a city in Egypt, or imagine a scene in Egypt right now, chances are the landmark you think of is a pyramid or a sphinx. They were built during this time frame. The straw they added to the bricks, it worked because those buildings are still around today. They really knew what they were doing. Now, the trick with these mud bricks is they only really work in a certain area. The mud bricks are really, they don't do well with extra water. And so you start to go north or south when if it gets a little too wet or you get too much snow, the mud bricks don't work. But right there where they are in Egypt, they were able to build really strong, defensible cities, in part because of the strength of their bricks. And the way that they solved this problem was by looking at the materials that were right around them. They didn't have to go out and invent a new kind of building structure. They didn't have to invent a new sort of resource. They used straw, which was abundant. They used something they had in abundance. And so as we think about ways to solve problems, one great little lesson we can get from the Egyptians here is that a lot of times a key to solving the problems is not going somewhere else and finding a different resource, but it's using the resources that are already at our disposal in a different way. Straw is not the most obvious building material, but once you combine it with the mud and the clay and the water and you bake it, it adds strength to the bricks. And so as we find ourselves in the middle of this very strange world, we have had to do exactly this. We have had to use things that are already at our disposal to solve problems. That is why I am looking at your faces on a computer for our Lenten soup suppers. Right? This is a technology that already existed that we never used in this way before. And if you think about all the ways that our church has adapted, we have used things that we already had in a completely new way. And so, but as we kind of go from this week to next week, as you're trying to solve all the different problems this strange world has thrown at you, pay attention to the resources that are at your disposal. See if maybe there's something you can use in a new way. But in the meantime, I am going to send word to our settler drones. And we are going to let them know that I will move our participants tab back over here. We're going to let them know that they need to use straw for their bricks to work. And once they add the straw, I'm confident that they will be able to build some pretty impressive structures for us, and they'll be able to make our church proud as we continue our program of evangelism. But I did get a message from them while you were in your breakout rooms. These messages, their grammar is just horrible, these drones. But they told us that they hear a sound in the distance and it does not sound natural. They're not exactly sure what it is. It sounds vaguely similar to the sounds they make when they're building bricks, and they're going to investigate and see if they can figure out what it is. But at this point, we're not really sure. So our settler drones, what is it that they hear? And what are they going to build? Do you think they can conquer this new world? I'll tell you next week. And so next week we'll get back together. We'll figure out what our settler drones have heard. We'll figure out what they build, and we'll tackle another problem and another empire. So as we wrap up our time together, doing questions is a little awkward in this format, and I also don't want to keep you too long. But let's give it a try. Are there any burning questions you'd like to ask before we wrap up our time together? You may unmute yourself and just chime in. All right. I'm hearing none. If you have them, feel free to speak out loud. If not, you can send me an email. I do maybe see somebody trying to unmute. Dylan, are you
That
unmute?
was really cool.
Good. Thank you. Do you have any questions, Dylan? Okay. All right. So next week we will get back together and we are going to try to end around 7-ish each week, because I know it can, I mean, being on Zoom can get a little,